Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome back to Homeschool Together. Thank you for joining us. If you have a chance, head down into the show notes below where there'll be lots of things for you to click. Best thing you could do, we're gonna change up. Go out and leave us a review on iTunes. We haven't done that as much as in the last few years, so please feel free to head out there. There should be a link. There should be a link there on exactly how to do that. Today we're going to be getting into the last episode of standards, so it'll be the end of standards forever. You never have to worry about them ever again. And we'll be closing out here talking about ELA standards and the wide-ranging considerations around that and what you may need to consider if you are looking to use standards, looking to maybe transition back into school. We know a lot of homeschoolers may be homeschooling for a short period of time, or they may be thinking about homeschooling just for a couple of years and then moving back into, like, say, middle school. We know there's a lot of different considerations, and we want to make sure that you guys have the right information, right understandings about these types of things. And these things may play into your considerations of what you need to do if you're returning back to school, or if you just want to do homeschooling and you want to make sure that your learner is covering all the things that they are supposed to learn according to the generalized standards, if that is important to you. Mm-hmm. We did a lot of tools, and I'll put links to all the different show notes talking about standards, if they're important or not for us as homeschoolers, but also how to use AI to decode a lot of these standards. One of the things when we are really thinking about kind of Byzantine rules and bureaucracy and things that are built off of things like this, we want to make sure that we're understanding that. And it can be really difficult for us to do that. So we've made a lot of recommendations to use a lot of AI tools to help you analyze and decode and compare and contrast what you're doing, maybe even as like a little check-in, as like kind of like a homeschooling life coach in some respects.
I've used it for so many things. And
use it in that way, as kind of like a partner, a really smart partner that can help you search for things, help you understand things. Because a lot of times these things can be very confusing. We may not have the head space or the brain space at the end of the day to do a lot of planning, a lot of analysis. You may just have enough in the tank at the end of the day to get the next set of library books and and update your curriculums and pull out your new sheets.
Oh my God, that's more in the tank than I have.
Yeah, I know. And we know it's very difficult, and some of us are out here, and we know we do a little bit more of an eclectic homeschooling, or maybe you are a kind of what I say, on-demand homeschooler, where you're maybe chasing the interest of your learner, maybe a little bit unschooly, maybe a little bit, child-led learning and deciding what you're doing, and you want to make sure your ELA choices and how you're designing your curriculum. This is a good example of like something that, as homeschooling parents, we may not understand. We may not understand what are the progressions of an ELA curriculum or an ELA experience across time through all the various tranches that ELA branches off into. Math is a little bit more straightforward, I think, because it's just here's a bunch of concepts. A lot of the curriculums are really good at teaching those concepts. They do it over a certain period of time. You move on to the next curriculum. ELA really has this feeling of kind of a broader experience where you've got to not just do a lot of phonics work, you're doing also some spelling, you're doing writing, which is obviously related to reading, but is kind of a, reading in reverse, right? And that type of thing. You have a lot of grammar aspects. You're driving fluency capabilities. You're then also comparing and contrasting literature, fiction, nonfiction. It becomes this very, it's almost like a spider web that's kind of opening up along the way. And it can be very challenging for us to keep those plates spinning And using this as an example, what you went through, obviously in a separate type of thing, not related to ELA, but the same type of challenge where you have this goal, which is I want really good ELA literacy and reading comprehension and exposure to different literature and fiction and being able to analyze text and think critically and be able to take those thoughts and be able to write and compose your own thoughts, and how that evolves over time. Leaning back on ChatGPT, helping you make these decisions, reading these standards, checking the curriculums that you're choosing against that, building a plan.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've learned over the last few years is how many things, how many puzzle pieces go into an ELA experience. It's not like just math where you're just learning these concepts, expanding on the existing concept, moving forward with that. Maybe once in a while you learn something new like multiplication, but then that all starts folding into the things you did before.
Yeah.
With ELA, it really feels like there's this, it's like 7 or 8 different things, the Scarborough reading rope of the experience, right? We got all these different things you got to do.
Well, it's very experiential as well.
It is, yeah.
And it's not just the things that your student does, let's say by themselves, right? Which you're talking about, the reading and writing and spelling and all these pieces, reading comprehension, all of it, right? It's also listening and speaking, which are pieces of ELA that I frankly often forget about, because I often think about like, oh, we're thinking about a writing workbook, or they're going to read a story and they're going to do a book report or whatever it is. But being able to listen, take in that information, absorb it, go like, okay, this is what this means. This is how I can then use that information. And then being able to articulate that out, give a presentation or, discuss the ideas verbally, that's a big deal as well. And part of this that I think often gets overlooked, because I know that there's not as much focus, especially on the speaking part of it in school. I was in debate, and it was in high school, and that was like the only time we really did get up in front of the class and talk kind of things. We didn't have a lot of those experiences generally in my other classes, but it's something we need to remember too as part of this.
And one of the things, with the ELA is that because you have so many elements here that we're about to go through and talk about, sometimes the learners moving at different speeds with those elements, trying to keep them all aligned is very difficult. They may be running out ahead in one and maybe lagging in another. A lot of times when we're buying curriculum, we go, oh, we got a reading curriculum, but it doesn't do any spelling, doesn't do any literature, it doesn't do any writing activities and things like, oh, I need to get a separate curriculum for that.
Doesn't do any speaking.
We don't see anything like that. And there may be a comprehensive ELA curriculum out there.
Yeah, we're not saying that, but usually we'll grab like a writing workbook.
And then we'll do, we'll get our own literature that we choose, and we'll do a writing curriculum. We'll do, handwriting without tears, and all these different options that are out there. With math, it's just like, oh yeah, we bought the math curriculum.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not buying the place value curriculum. I'm not doing the geometry section for a third grader. It's all in the one curriculum, right? Everything's included.
It definitely is more straightforward.
Yeah.
I think that's important. So when you're looking at ELA, right? And, so
the Common Core standards.
And Common Core is going to divide it into these 5 different sections. So it's going to be RL for reading literature, RI, which is reading informational, so that's your nonfiction reading. W is for writing, SL is for speaking and listening, and then L is for language use, and we're talking about grammar and things, right? So those are going to be your little codes. And just like math, they're going to focus by grade level, and then they're going to have their, subsections and things. The other difference about these from math is that they're a bit more ambiguous. You could have, as you said in the last podcast that we did about decoding, you could have a standard written for ELA that's the same in 1st grade and 12th grade. They say the same words, but they're meant to be done. That thing is meant to be done at that grade level. And that's the place where I think we need to...
There's a lot of squish there.
There's a ton of squish there, because it's like, oh, needs to be able to read and understand this text. Well, okay, that's different at 1st grade and 12th grade, but the standard gives you
green eggs and ham and the Scarlet Letter, right?
Yeah,
two different
the
stories.
Standard doesn't give you any of that context. It doesn't tell you, other than it should be this grade level. Well, what is that grade level? What is a 1st grade level? And this is one of those places where online research can help. But definitely, we've been leveraging a lot of AI to help us, like, how do we evaluate what's a 1st grade reading level?
And not using AI as the final answer. using
it's a
AI
great place to start.
as a great place to start and say, hey, can you get me more resources on this? Where can I go out and find more information on X? It's sort of that old adage about Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia is not the end goal, it's a starting point. Use your citations to get you moving elsewhere, right?
And if you ask ChatGPT to give you citations when it answers you, like, hey, I need to know where to find these things, or give me an example book that would be at that level, then you can go and you can do some more research on that book and say, okay, yeah, I get that now. And I agree, I found other sources that corroborate that book is that reading level. Then you can try to find other things, other books that are all similar. Yep. So if we step through one of them, so if you look at the standard, it's going to say something like RL.3.2. So RL we know is for reading literature, and the 3 is for grade 3. And the 2 means it's the second standard of that thing. Yep. So it's similar to the math. You've got your little numeric or a little alpha code at the beginning, and then the number is the grade, and the next thing is what standard of however many standards is in that grade of that section.
And that text, I think it says we have the example here. Recount stories including fables, folk tales, and myths from diverse cultures. Determine the central message, lesson, or moral, and explain how it is conveyed through key details. That is interesting words.
Right. Yeah.
What does that mean in a practical sense? And especially,
what does that mean?
What does that mean to a homeschool family that is trying to do that activity, right? Like, what does that mean? What do I have to do? And does that wording have multiple layers in there that I don't, intuitively understand that, we need to do this thing, then into this thing, and then into this thing. We think it might just be one thing, but it may actually be speaking and saying, well, we need to evolve our thinking over these times. You can't just, determine the central message before you've done the lesson or the moral explanation. You may have to do things in order and things like that. We may not understand that. Again, this is where ChatGPT can help you, give you ideas, explain to you what that means, give you suggestions, and then you can take that information and maybe build something that you want to do. Maybe you have that learner who loves to read folk tales, but doesn't like to read folk tales from this country, likes to read them from that country. And you're putting
they're really into dragons. So you're going to find a Chinese folktale about dragons.
Exactly.
Whatever. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this too is this says that they need to be able to recount the story, determine the message, explain. They don't say how that has to happen. Our first thought goes to, okay, well then they've got to write. My third grader's got to write a paragraph on what this means. Not necessarily. This isn't a writing standard. This is about reading and reading comprehension. So this could be that they can tell you about it.
Or they give a small oral presentation.
Exactly.
Or they make a collage or a trifold display or something like that.
Right. What if they draw and they're like, okay, well, this child is going to be doing a pictorial recounting like a comic book style of this is the story, and they're going to have different drawings. And you say, what's this one? Oh, well, that's when they found out that kindness is what's most important, or whatever the thing is, the moral or lesson. So this doesn't tell you how your child has to be able to fulfill the standard.
And there's a million different ways to demonstrate competency and knowledge of a subject or a goal like this.
They could even do it as a play. They could your children could reenact the story.
Exactly.
This is just showing that they understood it.
And that's a great way. What you're saying there is really important, allowing that learner to make that choice. Sometimes you may want to give them a couple options, and because they get to make that choice, they're going to be more motivated, more intrinsic interest in the topic and completing that and showing mastery through that and being able to push through because, he gets to write this in a comic book form, or she gets to get up there and play dress up and, explain what happened in the story in the form of a play or a theater. Those are super powerful features that we can do in a homeschool to really tailor to our learners' needs. Right,
that maybe they can't do in different environments with too many kids. Yep. So another example, this is a writing example. It's W.5.1. So this is a 5th grade first level standard of the writing. So it says, write opinion pieces on topic or texts, supporting a point of view with reasons and information. Yep. So this sounds fairly straightforward, but my first question is like, oh, okay, well, like how many paragraphs? Like how long should this be? right?
How can I support my learner in understanding and organizing their thoughts through graphic organizers?
Is
and
this
things
supposed
like
to
that?
have
Yeah.
like an opening paragraph to tell them what you're going to tell them, 3 paragraphs where you tell them, and then tell them what you told them, the summary, right? Is this a 5-paragraph standard essay? What's expected for 5th grade? And this is where I would try to find, use Chatty if you can, or find online examples of what a 5th grade level work should look like. A teacher in a classroom who's seen 20 years of 5th grade work knows exactly what they're looking for, but we've never seen, I don't know what a 5th grader should be producing. I know what my child can produce, but I'm not sure what standard I should be holding them to. When can I say that, hey, this standard is met this year?
And
how do I judge that?
That's a great point. And a lot of times we're so deep in the trenches, we think about, like what you said just then, I know what my student can do.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'm guilty of this a lot, where I'm not thinking about where they need to go. I'm thinking about just doing the next day's lessons. And along that path, we'll get to some other point into the future. And this is something I know teachers will think, I need to get these students at the beginning of the year from here up to here. Mm-hmm. And, there's going to be 25 students, and they're all going to kind of like scatter plot their way up and to the right to some grid of new knowledge and new capabilities, wherever they'll be. But I rarely think about like, in 6 months, I want to see my child writing a full paragraph.
Yeah.
I rarely think that, because I'm so deep in the trenches. I'm like, I just want to get through the next thing. I want to accomplish the next task. I want to get that next lesson done. And I'm trusting that as I'm going through this process, we're going to discover where we go, as opposed to starting to think like, I need to get there. How do I get there? How do I get her from here to there? And I don't even know where there is, right?
Yeah.
And so like a lot of times we need to answer these questions, because I think it's hard for us to know where we're going if we don't have a target or don't have a destination. And I think sometimes I am so lacking in that sometimes, where I think at the end of this year, my daughter should be writing a full story that's 2 pages long, right? I need to know if that's where I need to go. And what steps along the way can I use to get there, and what type of tools do I need, or what type of additional learning or knowledge do I need to gather as an educator? Maybe there's some tricks, and maybe there's ways that they teach this, and I'm thinking about what I did 30 years ago, trying to remember what I did in 4th grade to learn these, or I'm just saying, well, I do this in my job, maybe this is what my kid should do, right? Mm-hmm. I used to do this at my job, maybe I'll have my kid do this, and that's just super boring to the kid, and there's so many more other creative ways to accomplish these tasks. Again, this is why leaning into understanding the standards, using ChatGPT to help you understand where to go and how to do that, giving you suggestions, and then going out to YouTube, Edutopia, whatever it might be, to get some really cool ways that teachers do this in a motivating way. I think it's something that I need to be better at as a homeschooling parent, and this may also help you at home as well.
So giving some tools here to help interpret the language. There's a couple of key verbs you should look for when you read these standards. The first one is recount. You'll see that a lot. Yeah. So this just means retell with some structure, right? You don't want to retell the story all over the place by telling the end first, and then the middle, and then the beginning, and then some of the end again. And
do it verbatim. We want them to be able to take in the information and then write it in their own voice, right?
Right, exactly.
Retell, right?
Describe, meaning identify specific traits or actions that happened. Support is to back up ideas with examples or evidence. Determine means to figure out and explain the meaning. So, for an example, this is a reading informational standard for 4th grade. Mm-hmm. It says, explain events, procedures, ideas, or concepts in a historical, scientific, or technical text. Okay. So what this means, what we would read through this is, have your child read nonfiction and explain what happened and why in their own words, possibly with diagrams, summaries, or timelines. Yep. And that would be the 4th grade standard. So another one, participate in collaborative conversations with diverse partners. This is a 2nd grade speaking and listening one. Mm-hmm. So this just means have your child discuss a story with a sibling, join a book club, narrate aloud after reading with you, right? So you just want them to be able to have conversations with different people. They don't have to be outside your house. It could be inside your house, but be able to have Collaborative is the key word. So they're not confrontational discussions. This is our daughter just started what she's calling the BFF book club with her good friend. And they meet up once a week and they talk about the couple chapters that they read in their book.
Grimm Sisters right now?
Yeah, the Grimm Sisters, the second book. And they're really loving it. So they have tea and somebody makes cookies. Whoever's house hosts the meeting makes cookies or scones or whatever.
It took it was challenging to get them started, but now they're starting to do it on their own. They're
really digging it. They look forward to meeting, and they're on their second book, so I feel like this is going well. They both are enjoying it, but like that's an example. So
it's very cute.
You could also have we used to do this when we would when our child would read something when she was kind of struggling, we'd have her call up my parents on the Google Hub and explain to them what she read, and they would have a discussion about it. So, when you're just looking at this, it's like participate in collaborative conversations with diverse partners. Like, what does that mean? It just means talk with different people in a constructive way, about something that you read or did, or, it doesn't have to be a book necessarily.
Yep.
It's just speaking and listening. So look for some of those key words and you'll start to see them over and over again. And then you can kind of decode this like, oh, this is what they really mean.
No, I love that. I love those ideas and everything. So, we've talked a little bit about using the ELA standards to help guide your instruction. One of the big things is, read literature and read informational texts.
Yeah.
So fiction and nonfiction.
We don't do enough nonfiction.
Yeah, we don't. We've started to change because I'm now using the 180 Days Social Studies book.
It's true.
And in that book, and then also I'm doing the Harcourt Family Press reading level books for grade level. And both of those have both fiction. Well, they have the reading one has fictional text, but also I think there's some nonfiction text as well. But in the social studies one, almost every single page now at I think grade 4 that we're at has full on paragraphs talking about some historical experience or some type of civics related thing, or, something within the community or something of that nature, whether it's describing, community helper or something like that. And then she has to go ahead and write on what she read about. And it's a great way to just kind of like very low cost, get age appropriate informational texts. I also like it as kind of like a validation of like, oh, this is a big company that makes money and sells books into schools and people at a very specific grade level. Well, that's a great place to go get example texts that you're looking for, and then maybe try to understand, what level of expectations there are with respect to writing and whatnot.
You can get a good guide. It's fun too with informational, nonfiction. Find something that your child's interested in.
Oh yeah.
Our daughter's very interested in all things kind of, preteen, growing up, and all that kind of stuff. So she really enjoys reading about that, how to do your hair, how to care for your skin, just like all that kind of stuff. She's really into right now. And I'm like, hey, this is all nonfiction stuff. She's enjoying it. She's learning, and so that totally counts. So yeah, you're right. So the first one, encouraging fiction and nonfiction. And then for writing, you want to balance doing like narrative things, where they're writing a story or, their own book or whatever, with opinions and informational writing. So the narrative is important. It's, it's creative, obviously. And when they read fiction, then they can try to, make their own fiction happen. So I think that's really great, because then they're reading enough to understand the structure and recreating that for themselves. And then with opinion text, it's important for them to be able to form their own ideas that weren't necessarily given by what they read.
Well, to read critically as well.
Read critically, think about it, and what's my opinion of this? And then they need to be able to regurgitate like facts and information, as if we're writing a book report or a biography. So there's, having that balance, trying to get all three in can be challenging. But that's one of those places where books like that come in really handy, because you can get that balance in a workbook, for example. Our girls do like 2 pages of they each have 3 workbooks, and they do 2 pages a day. And it's been a really helpful way to kind of plug these little gaps of something we wouldn't otherwise get to.
And just getting more time reading those things. It's hard for us to produce enough books, check out enough books. These are kind of pre-canned, ready to go informational texts that kind of satisfy that need. in kind of a low effort on our side, because we're
Yeah.
listen, as educators, we don't have a lot of time, and sometimes
We have almost no time.
periodically taking the easy path on small little things like that is, I think, a win from us.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, and it's not like all the time. It's just, for a couple months, she does a social studies book.
Not everything has to be exciting all the time.
I
That's
agree.
my kind of thing, and I tell
agree.
that to the kids often when they're
Especially when they get a little bit older.
Yeah.
It's really hard when they're really young, because you're right. You got to keep them excited, right?
You
But now
do.
she's a fourth grader, and it's like, listen, sweetie, you can spend 10, 15 minutes reading this and writing a
Even our
sentence or
first
two.
grader, sometimes I tell her, she's like, oh, I don't like the science book. And I'm like, yeah, well, not everything has to be exciting all the time. I do need you to do it, though. And she's like, oh, okay. They do kind of get it. And I think it's okay to plug these gaps.
The next one here is speaking and listening. We talked about that already, but really practicing that narration, doing presentations, retelling stories out loud, I think is super important, but also doing that in a conversational way where you're modeling not only your own opinion, but also the questioning and the not devil's advocate thing, but the Socratic type of questioning and answering, kind of drawing out information from the
asking
student.
follow-up questions. It's one thing to have them present and think about if you were presenting to a group of people and they had no questions for you. That would, even if they were like, oh, great job, and clapped for you or something. I mean, it's always better when it's interactive.
I only give perfect presentations. though.
So we like to ask questions, and that is a really important point, because then it's not just what they've memorized, but also, can they think on their feet with the information that they have about that topic?
I want to see the questions, because you're right. If you give some type of discussion or whatnot, if they're not asking questions, that means they're not contending with the information, right?
Right, not engaging
They're
with
just
it.
like, oh yes, okay, now I understand. Great. It's like they're not like thinking through it or thinking how to apply that information in
that's
their
true.
own lives. Questions at the end of a presentation are really good, because it's these people are working through the ideas that you gave them and how that fits into their lives, and then trying to ask you for clarification on that. I think questions are super important, and asking those questions or getting questions or comments from your learner about certain things means they're engaging with that subject. The next one would be language. Obviously, teaching grammar and vocabulary through context.
Yeah.
Expanding the number of words,
Right.
the
And you
raw
can,
words.
obviously you can get the concepts through workbooks, but putting it into context in real passages from writing is one of the best ways to, get that really to take root.
Yeah, exactly.
So looking at how the skills grow, this is a vertical progression. It's not exactly as by the numbers, pun intended, as
Exactly.
math, but it is growth, right? The standards are designed to increase in complexity with every grade. So in first grade, maybe students describe characters, but by fourth grade, they're going to explain how the characters change or how the actions the characters take drive the plot. And then, maybe by seventh or eighth grade, they're analyzing how the characters interact, how they affect one another. They're going to start thinking critically. So it is an evolution. It's an evolution with all of these areas. With math, they may learn that one concept that they need that year, and then they may build very little on that in the future and kind of not really come back to that.
Yeah.
It's funny, our daughter is working through some averages and means and things the other day. Average and mean are the same thing, but she was working on averages and medians, I should say. Anyhow, she was doing some work and she was doing long division, and she was having a problem. I had to actually look up online how to do long division because I haven't done it in so long. There was a point in school you had to do it in elementary school, but the moment that you were allowed to use a calculator, I literally never did long division ever again. It was just accepted that something easy like addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication could just be done with a calculator. You had moved past that step, right? Reading and writing, there's never a move past that step.
No, yeah, you always just keep doing more.
It always
more
just
complexity.
keeps growing. Yeah, it's like a simple picture, and then every year it gets more complex and more complex and more complex until you have this really colorful, detailed picture. It's like that. So I think that's another way that it's different from math, because there may be concepts in math you just literally never go back to.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see that kind of funny in my own. I'm starting to do a little bit more dictation because I'm finding just typing is too slow. Mm-hmm. And I can just dictate and think and free think. And why should I be encumbered by the speed of fingers clacking on a keyboard and everything? Like it's like I'm just using the tools, but I'm still doing the same activity. Is that writing? Is that still writing? Like it is, right? In a lot of respects, I'm using a tool to transcribe my thoughts onto the thing. Am I doing it with my hand with a pencil? Am I doing it with the keyboard with my fingers? Or am I doing it with my mouth to a microphone? I mean, I think it's all the same in a lot of respects, but there are different skills there. Like maybe we do want them to be able to write with hand because, going forward, we know with AI examinations and whatnot is going to be less and less computers because there is the fear of AI usage.
Right.
Writing, hopefully we won't see that, but writing in, a number 2 pencil and a blue book. I mean, how many times did you have the blue book when you were younger? Yeah. It was always the blue book, right? It was the blue books. We got to do the blue books. There's like 20 pages of composition and whatnot. And I wonder if we're going to go back to that and like, will handwriting become more important? Will they be able to do stuff on the computer? Maybe they could dictate, but is there an AI fear? It's like,
well, and it's interesting to say that I don't know, and I don't know this. I don't think there's handwriting standards in this. I think the standards,
like the way of writing, like how to do a cursive S versus.
Yeah, there's none of that. No. I think it's all really about, it says you must be able to write. It doesn't say that you couldn't type.
Yeah.
Right. Your students writing, quote unquote, maybe typing, and I think that. Obviously, we need to be able to...
does typing include 2 thumbs on a keyboard on a phone? Right? Like, is typing?
We need to be able to... Our kids need to be able to learn to write by hand. It's a skill they need to have and it needs to be legible and all those things, right? But just like scribing for a younger child, when they don't have the dexterity yet or the spelling or whatever it is that maybe their thoughts would be hindered by having to write by hand... There may be some students whose thoughts would be hindered to write by hand who would be better off typing it on a computer. And if that's an accommodation that we can make for them so that they can really get that, the standards are about the thoughts, not about the mechanism
of getting those words down.
Right. Yeah. Whether it's dictating them or writing by hand or typing, or scribing, whatever it is, depending on their age and their abilities. I think whatever we can do to not hinder that is really what's most important, because the standards don't tell you have to be able to hold with a pincer grip and
a 3-point pincer grip.
Right. No, that's not part of it.
On a trifold Ticonderoga at kindergarten. Yeah. We don't specify that.
Yeah, they don't. So here, I hope this was helpful in learning to decode these a little bit, but mostly just use the standards to help plan your reading and writing goals for the year or check where your child's at from the last year, right? It's just, we've talked about different ways to use the standards. Use them in whatever way suits you and your homeschool best.
100%.
So this makes sure you're covering a range. Just remember to mix up genres, fiction, nonfiction, different styles. Find the groove that works for you.
Different activities as well. There's a million different ways to do a lot of these techniques that can be exciting and different and new and fresh with your students. Really utilize these tools to help you do that. And I hope all these standards talk over the last few weeks has helped you maybe reinvigorate your need to be different and use these standards to help create a more comprehensive experience for your students as you move forward with your homeschool.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time.
Happy homeschooling!